Herkese selamlar. Bugün iOS Developer Olmak serisinin ikinci günüyle devam ediyoruz. Bir önceki videoda ilk 4 dakika mikrofonda sesimi almamış OBS. O yüzden bu videoda ilk başta nereden bahsettiğimi yine kısaca anlatayım. Sürecin nasıl ilerleyeceğinden bahsettim biraz. Burada belli başlı birkaç kaynak buldum, birkaç video buldum. Video serisi ve kurs buldum. Bu video serilerini ve kursları izlerken aslında bu süreci e, video çekiyor olacağım. Kendimce ekstra açıklamalar yapacağım. Kendi bildiklerimi, kendi öğrendiklerimi ekleyeceğim. Ama çoğunlukla da bu süreç içinde öğreneceğim. Yani öğreniyor olduğum her şeyi aslında bir nevi kaydediyor olacağım ve paylaşıyor olacağım. Sürecin bu şekilde ilerleyeceğinden bahsettim aslında kısaca. İşte şu anda bu videoyu izliyorum. Diğer kaynaklar da burada. Örnek veriyorum işte 100 Days of Swift UI kaynağı. Daha çok böyle makale şeklinde ilerliyor. Onun dışında işte Swift ile iOS programlama bu BTK Akademi'nin bir kursu ve işte sürecin sonunda bir sertifika veriyor. Buranın da içeriğine baktım. Gayet güzel şeyler var. 27 saatlik bir kurs. Bu gayet uzun da bir kurs. Bu tarz kaynakları inceleyip bunların bunları izlerkenki süreci videolaştırmak aslında bu serinin amacı. Onun dışında bir önceki videoda neler yaptık ondan da kısaca bahsedeyim, değineyim hatırlatma amaçlı. Kısaca bu Xcode uygulamasının bir incelemesini yapmış olduk. Nerede ne var, neler nasıl kullanılıyor, kısaca bunlara baktık. Apple ekosistemini tanıdık biraz. Örneğin işte burada bir image e, özelliği eklediğimizde bu sağ tarafta image ile ilgili özellikleri değiştirebileceğimiz bir alan geliyor. Atıyorum buradan fit'i fill yaptığımda tıklayalım. Burada otomatik olarak değişiyor ve burada da yenilediğimizde preview'da da farklı bir görüntü çıkıyor. Direkt buradan değişimi görebiliyoruz yani. Tekrardan değiştirelim. Mesela bu fill'de şu an tekrar fit olacak. Tekrardan ekrana sığacak yani oradaki aynen. Onun dışında işte bu uygulamayı run ettik. Bir Apple cihazında aslında gerçekten çalıştırıyor gibi e, görebiliyoruz burada. İşte farklı senaryolar yaratabildiğimizi gördük. İşte shake senaryosu, işte burada location senaryoları vesaire. Pek çok işimizi aslında hiç daha uygulamayı telefonumuza yüklemeden, telefona gerek bile duymadan bir Mac cihazı üzerinden kullanabildiğimizi gördük. Şimdi videoya devam edeceğim. En son yalnızca Lesson 1'i bitirmiştim. Şimdi bugün Lesson 2 ile Lesson 3'ü bitirmeyi hedefliyorum. Yaklaşık 1 saatlik bir video uzunluğu olacak. Tekrar dediğim gibi 1,5'da izliyorum ben bu videoları. Şimdi tekrardan başlatıyorum videoyu.
Codecrew.codewithchris.com. So between this lesson series and the community, I think you're going to make pretty good progress while having fun and learning a lot. I mean, these people did. Did you think I made those app icons and you used Xcode to build this? Now in this Xcode tutorial, I want to take a little more time and show you around so that you can understand what you did and begin to master this tool. Now you're going to want to pay close attention because over the course of your journey, you're going to be spending a lot of time inside Xcode, turning your app ideas into reality. Oh, and at the end of the video, I'll be sharing my Xcode tips and tricks with you that I use every day, so make sure you watch till the end. Okay, quick note before we begin. Back in lesson 1, I showed you how to download and install Xcode, so if you haven't done that yet, go ahead and do that first. Once you have Xcode launched, let's get into it. All right, let's create a new project. Click Create a new Xcode project right here, or go to File, New, and Project. Now, there are several options here, actually. They're templates, and you can create apps for different platforms, macOS, watchOS, tvOS for cars, even multi-platform if you want to launch your app on
Xcode'dan aslında işte farklı yalnızca iOS için değil, farklı macOS, tvOS vesaire bütün Apple ekosistemleri için uygulama yazabileceğimiz bir şey oluşturabileceğimizden bahsediyor. Ve işte Lesson 2 için anladığım kadarıyla farklı bir proje oluşturacak ki bu aslında daha iyi olur. Her lesson için, her gün için ayrı bir uygulama ve ayrı bir proje bazında ilerlemek daha iyi gibi.
on multiple platforms. However, we are going to choose iOS app. And actually, look, there's game, AR apps, there's iMessage, sticker packs, ton of stuff. We're going to stick with the basics for now. This is a good starting place. Let's click next. And here, let me explain some of these options for you so they don't look so cryptic. First of all, product name is easy, right? We're just going to put whatever we want to name this app. Now, team is something that I want to explain. Remember back in lesson 1 when we talked about the process to launch your app into the store? Well, the code from Xcode that gets turned into a code package, and then you have to code sign it, as in put your digital signature on it so that people can't impersonate you, and then that's the thing that gets put into the App Store. Well, this here is how you're going to code sign it. And to get a team on the drop down here, you actually have to sign up for the Apple Developer Program, which is that yearly paid program to allow you to submit apps. It will give you access to a portal where you can upload your digital signature, and that's how you're going to be able to create a team in here. But for the purpose of these demos,
Burada team'de şeyden bahsediyor. Yani aslında siz uygulamanızı eğer App Store'a publish etmek istiyorsanız burada bir team'e ya da yani publish etmek için Apple'ın paralı bir programına üye olmanız gerekiyor. Bunun fiyatını hatırlamıyorum. En son dolar bazında bir ücret alıyorlar. 100 dolar olabilir yıllık. Yanlış hatırlamıyorsam. Bundan bahsediyor yani. Eğer öyle bir ücret ödeyip publisher olursanız buradan o team şeyini seçip direkt aslında şeyde gözüken işte hangi üretici tarafından, hangi yapımcı tarafından yapıldığı gözüken o isme sahip oluyorsunuz. Buradan onu seçebiliyorsunuz yani hangi publisher'a yaptığınızı vesaire. Öyle anladım.
we can leave it as none. Now, what's more important though is this bundle identifier, because this is the unique ID for your app, and this has to be unique for all apps on the App Store. It's a combination of your product name, as you can see, as well as your organization identifier. And here you can put anything. Typically, people do com dot your company name or your personal name, and together that is your bundle identifier. Now, the next two pieces, interface and language, I want to draw your attention back to that diagram in lesson 1 where we said Swift UI is how you're going to build your user interfaces. Swift is the coding language you're going to use to express your logic, and together you're going to use those two tools to build your app. And that's essentially what these two things are. There are some options, however, in particular for interface. If you pull this down, you can select Storyboard or Swift UI. Swift UI is definitely a lot easier to learn, and it is the UI framework moving forward, because Swift UI is sort of the replacement for storyboards. Right now, as of today, there are still companies out there using storyboards, but Apple's full intention is to discontinue that and move forward with Swift UI. So I would definitely recommend learning Swift UI. And if you do choose Swift UI, you have to choose Swift. If you choose storyboard, you can still learn Objective-C. But again, I wouldn't start with Objective-C unless you had a very, very good reason specifically to do so. Maybe you are trying to target a job that only uses Objective-C, and that's what you would pick. But Swift UI and Swift is where
Burada da aslında işte yine Swift UI yani storyboard yerine storyboard'un ne olduğunu da bilmiyorum. Sanırım Swift UI'den önceki şey storyboard'muş. Storyboard yerine Swift UI gelmiş. Dolayısıyla Swift UI yerine storyboard kullanmanız için ekstra bir neden yok diyor. Swift UI'yi kullanıp geçebilirsiniz diyor yani.
is where we want to be. Now, these two options here, core data and include tests, these are options that you can always add to your app after the fact, so you don't feel pressured that you have to check them here. But even for the purposes of what we're learning, these are unnecessary. So core data is a way to have a local database on your device, and tests is used in software development where your project gets really big and you need to write automated test cases, because once your software gets really large, if you make a change, it's not feasible for you to manually test all the features all over again for every single change that you make. So you need to include automated testing that you can just click a button and run, and it'll say pass, fail, and you can see what breaks after you make a change. So again, not for us. Leave these unchecked. Let's go ahead.
Yani bu include test kısmında da yani şunu Swift data yapalım yine. Include test kısmında da yani işte eğer çok kompleks bir uygulama varsa ortada, yani bir sürü tabi olan, bir sürü sayfası olan, bir sürü butonu olan vesaire, bu yani her bir özellik için ayrı senaryoları, her bir özelliğin senaryosu için ayrı otomasyonlar yazıp aslında bu otomasyonları kontrol etmeyi sağlayan bir özellik diye anladım. Bizim için gerekli değil tabii.
Go ahead and click next. And now you can choose a place to save it. I would recommend, if you are taking this seriously and you are going to continue on learning, create a space in your hard drive, a folder, perhaps for all of your apps and projects, so that they can stay organized. For myself, I'll admit I'm a bit of a messy person and this is a demo. So I'm just going to create it on my desktop. Source control. Now this, if you don't know what this is, it's kind of like versioning. So imagine being able to take snapshots of your project and code, so that later on, if you accidentally break your project and it's not working anymore, you can always roll back to one of your snapshots. This is kind of like Time Machine on the Mac, if you've ever used that. So definitely a very good practice in software development. In fact, kind of mandatory if you're working professionally. For us right now, we are going to leave this unchecked because I will introduce this to you later on. Okay, let's go ahead and create.
Evet, burada da işte yine Git repository'den bahsediyor. Yani Git'in ne olduğunu az çok biliyorum. Yani kısaca, eğer işte çok böyle yine kompleks bir kodunuz varsa ve o koda bir özellik eklemek istiyorsanız, atıyorum. Ve özelliği eklediniz, örnek veriyorum, ve kodunuz bozuldu. Ve işte bir önceki kodun bozulmadığı kısma geri dönmenizi sağlayan bir uygulama aslında Git. İşte branch'ler var, main branch var vesaire. Burada branchler açarak hani kodunuzda eskiye dönmenizi sağlayan bir uygulama. Ancak yine şu an için gerekli olmayan bir şey. İleride bahsedeceğine değindi yani.
And create it. And let's check out our brand new project. So here's our brand new project. Before we dive into each of these files and tell you what they're for,
Yine ben burada yanlış demeyeyim, farklı bir kod. Yine burada bana farklı bir kod geldi.
let us talk about the major big areas of Xcode so you can get acquainted. So there are 5 main areas of Xcode. Firstly, on the left-hand side here, you have your navigator area. In the middle, the biggest area, you have your editor area. On the right-hand side, this is known as the inspectors or utility area. Across the top, at the top here, you have your toolbar area. And at the bottom, tucked away, is this debug area, which you really only need when you start working with code. So we're going to hide that again. So those are the 5 major areas of Xcode. Let's dive into each
Şurayı bir daha
area.
yazayım.
Therefore, let us talk about the major big areas of Xcode so you can get acquainted. So there are 5 main areas of Xcode. Firstly, on the left-hand side here, you have your navigator area. In the middle, the biggest area, you have your editor area. On the right-hand side, this is known as the inspectors or utility area. Across the top, at the top here, you have your toolbar area. And at the bottom, tucked away, is this debug area, which you really only need when you start working with code.
Yani işte burada debug arayası varmış. Burada navigate bar, yani uygulama arasında geçiş. Yukarıda toolbar. Sağda inspector, ortada da editor areası varmış. Aslında bu 5 alandan oluşuyor yani. Aynen. Göze hoş gözüküyor yani. Kullanması kolay bir uygulama.
With code, so we're going to hide that again. So those are the 5 major areas of Xcode. Let's dive into each one, and I'll show you in the context of your project what these areas are for. Let's start with the file navigator. So here you have your Xcode project and all of the files in your project. So you see these are collapsible folders. These are the files. These are the asset libraries that you learned about in lesson 1. But notice across the top here, there are tabs to the navigators. This first tab is the file navigator or project navigator, but there are different types of navigator. So you will encounter these when we get farther along. Right now, there's not too much to see. I would leave it on this first tab under File Navigator, Project Navigator, so you can take a look at all of your files. Next, let's move on to the editor area, the biggest area. This is where you're going to be spending most of your time editing your files. Notice that this area changes depending on what you're looking at. This file is a pure code file, so it's all code. This one is a view, so you're going to get half code, you're going to get the preview. And asset library, again, it changes. So the editor area is very versatile. It changes depending on what file you want to edit. Now, inside the editor area, there's also a lot of cool little tucked away things to make editing easier, such as across the top here, you can have tabs, there's a breadcrumb, you can even jump within the file, and you can you can split up this editor area into multiple panes, window panes as well, which I'll show you closer to the end of this lesson. For now, let's move on to the rightmost side. This is the inspector area. Sometimes people call it the utility area, which will work as well. However, what this is for is it allows you to configure whatever you are working on or looking at inside the editor area. So for example, if we you've seen this. If I put my cursor on one of the view elements, here I would be able to configure it, right? If I put my cursor on this thing called view, there's nothing I can configure with this keyword view. However, if I click across the tabs here, there is a quick help tab. Now this is useful because it tells me what this view keyword means and what it does. Here, this tab is the identity tab. It tells me where this file exists, where this content view exists on my.
Aslında bu sağdaki kısım en çok işimize yarayacak olan kısım olabilir. Örnek veriyorum. Bu L2'den değil de L1'e bakalım. Ama şurayı mı açmamız lazım? Yani burada bir şey gözükmüyor şu anda. Mesela bu image özellikleri şu anda gözükmüyor. Ne yapınca gözükmeli acaba? Yani şuralara birkaç kere tıklayıp dönünce özellikler tekrar geri geliyor. Burada quick help kısmı varmış. Yani burada aslında bu image fonksiyonu mu denir? Fonksiyon denebilir belki. Image fonksiyonunun declaration'ın ne olduğunu, aslında bir string yazıyorsunuz buraya. Ve bu string'in de aslında gitti. Neden gitti? Şeye tıklamak gerekiyormuş. Bu string'in de aslında kullanılan görselin ismi olması lazım asset'teki. Atıyorum. Bu işte color için farklı bir şey olabilir, text için farklı bir şey olabilir gibi. Buradan kolayca hepsinin declaration'ına, quick help kısmından bakabiliyoruz. Nasıl kullanıldığına, nasıl farklı şekilde kullanılabileceğine vesaire. Aynı şekilde burada yine kod dizinini görmemiz için bir tab grubu daha var. Buradan yine özelliklerini görebiliyoruz. Bu kısım ne işe yarıyor bilmiyorum. Bunu da bilmiyorum. İzlemeye devam edelim.
On my hard drive, right? And what app membership does it belong to and things like that. So that's what the inspector area is good for. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but there is a cascading effect going on, right? If I select this, it changes this. If I select something in the editor area, it changes what happens in the inspectors area. So think left to right waterfall. Next up, let's look at the top toolbar. Now, first of all, this leftmost button hides your navigators. If you need more space on your laptop, maybe your screen is kind of small, you can make more space. On the right-hand side, there's a similar button to hide the inspectors area. So now you get a full editor area for editing. There is this run button to run your app inside a simulator like we did in lesson 1. And here, you can click on the simulator, select a different one. You can test your app on all sorts of different simulators. Also, if you plug in your device into your computer, you are going to see that device here, and you can choose it, and you can actually launch your app on that device. So that's something we're going to do in this video series. So don't worry about that. We'll get to that. There, when you first plug in your phone, you're going to get a pop-up on your phone saying, do you trust this computer? And you're going to have to say trust before you can actually see it on this menu, just in case you're doing it right now. Here, it tells you what's happening behind the scenes. Sometimes, you know, if you're thinking Xcode is slow, it might be because it's doing something behind the scenes. And this is the status bar that tells you what's going on. Now, this Xcode Cloud is something that you don't have to worry about yet, but it's a way for you to be able to run your projects and test, run those test cases that I told you about when we created the project. It's a way to run those test cases on the cloud, on Apple's servers. The reason is because sometimes these take quite a while to run, and also you might want to run those tests on multiple different devices. And so you can deploy those things to the cloud and run them there. This icon we've used before, it's the library, right? So if we go back to the content view and you click this plus icon, there's our library. That's so useful. And then, yeah, we talked about this icon. So that's the toolbar. Now that you know your way around Xcode, let's take a look at your project files.
Şeyden bahsettik kısaca. Burada bir cloud simgesi var. Buradan işte atıyorum sizin donanımınız pek çok testi aynı anda çalıştırmaya yetecek kadar yeterli değildir. Bu yüzden cloud'da uygulamanızı farklı iPhone cihazlarında simüle edebiliyorsunuz. Bundan bahsetti. Onun dışında daha çok birinci lesson'da, birinci projede gösterdiği şeyleri tekrardan anlatıyor aslında. Aslında bu ilk ders olsaymış daha iyi olurmuş. Ama devam edelim.
So let's start at the very root of your Xcode project, which is inside your file navigator, this node right here. Now, this is where you can configure different things for your project. These are things like, what is the version number? What is the display name? Should it be able to display in various orientations? And all the things like that. Actually, this is probably pretty important. What iOS version should it be able to install on? You might set 16, and nothing lower than that will be able to install your app. And this is for the reason that sometimes you're using features which are only available on, let's say, iOS 16. So that is the root project node. Here is also where you would configure different things like you might have to add different capabilities to your app, such as Game Center or being able to do in-app purchases or notifications or things like that. You have to add different things. And just in general, there's a whole ton of settings. This is your project settings. Now, after that, there is a folder. Inside contains a couple more files. You've got this entry point. This is where your app starts. Okay, this is the first thing that gets executed before it launches the first screen of your app. And that is what this is, content view. If we click onto the next file, that is content view. You can see here, this is what it looks like. And the entry point, if you click back here, you can see that it creates a content view. So that makes sense, right? This is the entry point for your app. When the app launches, it creates this screen, content view, which is what you see here. And in fact, when you launch it in the simulator, this is the first screen that you see. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense. And next you have your asset library, which stores all of your
Buranın aslında uygulamaya giriş kısmı olduğundan bahsetti. Mesela bende biraz daha farklı ve kompleks bir yapı var gibi burada. Tam anlamlandıramıyorum şu anda. Ancak işte uygulama ilk açıldığında Content View diyerek işte aslında Content View'daki view'ı kullanıcıya göstermeyi amaçlıyor. Buradan farklı modifikasyonlar yaparak farklı durumlar için farklı senaryolar yazılabilir belki. Yani atıyorum belki Content View'dan önce bir datanın yüklenmesi gerekiyordur ki işte bir API ile çalışıyordur. O data internetten geliyordur. Ondan sonra Content View kullanıcıya gösteriliyordur. Tam bir şekilde gösteriliyordur yani. Ya da Content View gösteriliyordur, sonra data yükleniyordur. Bunların konfigürasyonu belki buralardan yapılabiliyordur.
all of your colors, your image assets, and even this is where you'd specify your app icon. You'd just place an image into here to have that be your app icon. And then inside preview content is another asset library, but this is just only specifically for the previews here that you see. So if you perhaps, sometimes previewing doesn't make sense if there's no data to preview, right? Like for example, if you've got a scrollable list of photos, but you don't have any actual photos, there's nothing really to see, right? So this is where you would put those test or preview assets to be used. And that, in a nutshell, are all of your files in your Xcode project. Next up, let's see how we can test our app. Now, in terms of testing your app, we mentioned the simulator in lesson 1. So just as a recap, you can select a simulator of your choice here, and then you can hit this run button, and it's going to launch an on-screen virtual device. If this is the first time you're doing it, expect a couple of minutes for this to boot up. But here, this is a great way to test your app. You can click through all the screens and interact with it. You can simulate different device features such as low memory situations or low network situations to see how your app would behave. And in general, just test your app. This preview here in the editor area is actually great for seeing how your screen looks like as you build it. And there are a couple of tools for that. For example, there are zooming capabilities here. You can zoom in, zoom out, zoom to fit, and zoom to 100%. That's what these different buttons do. You can also look at variations. For example, I can look at what dark mode would look like on my phone, or I could look at landscape orientation. If this is too tedious, you can look at multiple variations at once by clicking this button right here. And for example, I can click color scheme, and that's going to show me light and dark. I can click on orientation, for example, or maybe dynamic type, and see how different font sizes look on the UI. And then finally, we have these two different modes. By default, it's on this live mode, which lets you interact with the elements on your preview. For example, I may add a button. Let's open up the library under views, search for button. You'll see it there. And click and drag it, and you'll see a button. You can see by default, I'm on live mode down here, and I can interact with this. There's another mode called select, add a button. Gonna show me.
Bir saniye. Burada bir kısım varmış. Canvas Device Settings diye. Buradan eğer özellikleri aktif ederseniz Light Mode ile Dark Mode arasında geçiş yapabiliyor uygulamanız. Bu da tabii ki artık gerekli olan bir özellik. Yani hem Light Mode hem de Dark Mode için uyumluluğa sahip olması gerekiyor. Aynı zamanda burada işte Landscape yani sağa yatırma, sola yatırma gibi özelliklerin de simülasyonunu yapabiliyorsunuz. Şuradan biraz daha geri alacağım.
Example, I can look at what dark mode would look like once by clicking this button right here. And for example, I can click color scheme, and that's going to show me light and dark. I can click on orientation, for example, or maybe dynamic type, and see how different font sizes look on the UI. And then finally, we have these two different modes. By default, it's on this live mode.
Aslında bayağı iyi burası dynamic type variance'ın olması ve diğer özelliklerin de olması tabii yani. Tabii bu uygulamada bir şey değişmiyor sanırım anladığım kadarıyla. Ama buradaki gibi plain text olduğunda sanırım değişiyor.
Which lets you interact with the elements on your preview. For example, I may add a button. Let's open up the library under views, search for button. You'll see it there. And click and drag it, and you'll see a button. You can see by default,
Mesela ben burada button'ı nereye eklemeliyim? Burada bir V-stack var mı? Yok. Navigation split view var. Bu nerede bitiyor? Burada bitiyor. Burada bitiyor diyebilir miyiz? Şuraya mesela V-stack diyebilir miyim? Şu şekilde mi yapmalıyım? Bunun içine de bir button eklemek istiyorum. Yine özellik açtım, kapattım. Burada burada parantez içinde burada da action yazıyor. Cannot find action in scope dedi.
I'm on live mode down here, and I can interact with this. There's another mode called selectable mode or select.
Şunu bir kapatalım. Bu neden olmadı acaba? Şurayı sileyim. Button'ı buradan alalım. Bakalım ne değişecek. Gerçekten de oldu şu an. Neden? Neyi farklı yaptım ki? Şu an biz de tıklayabiliyoruz aynen. Ama button en alta geldi otomatik olarak sanırım. En alttan üste doğru sıralıyor olabilir. Eklendiğinde buraya bir şey. Şimdi aklıma farklı bir şey gelmedi de. Devam edelim buradan.
Select mode, and it allows you just simply to select your elements. Perhaps you want to see the corresponding code for that element. So that's a great way to learn. Another functionality is selecting an element so that you can configure it in the inspector area. That's pretty helpful as well. And now I want to leave you with some Xcode tips that I use every single day inside Xcode. These are so useful, and it may not be apparent right now, but as we start building the app in this video series, you're going to see us using these. So the first one, probably the most basic one, is this one here. These go back and go forward arrows. These work just like your web browser arrows. And sometimes, let's say you're moving from this file to another file here and there, these buttons just let you jump back to the place you were in. So when you're working with code, sometimes the code file gets really long, and this breadcrumb right here allows you to jump between different sections in your file, which is really handy. Here, you can actually jump to different files as well, clicking this breadcrumb right here. On the upper right-hand corner here, there are a few useful things as well. So this middle icon allows you to customize how the editor looks. So if you choose Show Editor Only, you don't need the preview, perhaps. You can click that, right? You can also, there's this mini map, which is quite useful as well, which lets you scrub your Show Editor Only. You don't need the preview, perhaps. You can click that, right? You can also, there's this mini map, which is quite useful as well, which lets you scrub your file. So if your file was very, very long, this would be an easy way to just sort of navigate, and you can see at a glance what your file is looking like. If you want to, let's say, look at two files side by side, you could do that by clicking this upper right-hand corner button and opening two editors side by side. And obviously, the more screen real estate that you have, the more useful this becomes. As for now, it is probably not very useful for me with the size of this Xcode window and with the size of the font that I have right here. But nonetheless, you know that this is available to you. And there are different tabs right here, as you can see here. Now, as you code more, you'll undoubtedly run into a situation where you're wondering, what else can the VStack do? Or can the VStack do this or that? So I'm happy to say that documentation is embedded right into Xcode. Now, you can just Google VStack and find it, or there are a couple of fast ways to do that within Xcode. So one way is go into Windows, Developer Documentation, and you can just search up VStack in here. I've already found it, but yeah, you can do that. You can look at what it can do, how to use it, and things like that. An easier
Window'dan Developer Documentation'da burada istediğimiz şeyi arayabiliyoruz. Bu niye full ekran açıldı? Neyse, şuradan VStack'e bakalım mesela. Bulamadı. Case sensitive olabilir. S'yi küçük yazmıştım, belki o yüzden görmemiştir. Burada aynen kısaca bir doküman hazırlanmış. Conforms to view. Burada view'e gidebiliyorsunuz. İlgili şeylere kısaca atlayabiliyorsunuz hemen. Sol tarafta da gayet detaylıca açıklanmış gözüken pek çok ne denir? Framework var sanırım. Bunu kapatalım. Devam edelim.
easier way, even faster. It's just putting your cursor over it and using the inspector panel and going over to this quick help section. And then you can even click on the link here to open it to that page. Even faster, you want to hold down the Option or Alt key on your keyboard, hover over VStack, and you can get a pop-up dialog for that. Again, there's a link to open the developer documentation. Really handy stuff. All right, so now you know all about the file navigator, the editor area, the inspector area, the toolbar, and the debug area. And you know how to start your own Xcode project and what each of the files in your project is for. In the next lesson, we're gonna get hands-on again, and you're gonna learn even more skills for building user interfaces, aka the screens of our app. In this lesson, you're gonna learn multiple ways of how to build a screen of your app. Now, I know you're itching to build user interfaces like these. These were done by our designer JC in a piece of software called Figma. As you improve your skills, you'll be able to translate designs like these into your own app inside Xcode. By the end of the lesson, you'll have built this, using only these few basic elements, a few layout containers, a few views, and a few modifiers. Considering that we're only 3 lessons in, this is amazing progress. Okay, buckle up, let's get started. Oh, and just...
Şimdi Lesson 2'yi bitirdik. Lesson 2'de aslında herhangi bir proje yazılmadı, yani hani bir projenin yaratılmasına gerek yoktu gibi geldi bana. Lesson 3'te ise bir uygulama yazacakmışız yeniden. Bu yine daha heyecanlı bir şey gibi. O yüzden bunu aslında Lesson 2 ve Lesson 3'ü komple Lesson 2 gibi düşünebiliriz. Devam ediyorum tekrardan.
And just a quick note, in the last lesson, you learned how to use Xcode, so if you need a refresher, check it out right over there. Also, if you're enjoying the series so far, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss the next lesson. Let's quickly review how these building blocks come together to form the user interface, or UI for short. So views are the elements that the user sees on the screen. Modifiers are applied to the views to change its behavior or look and feel. Finally, layout containers organize and arrange views in various ways. Now, fun fact, layout containers are also considered as a view. Just think of them as container views. All right, let's start by creating our Xcode project. So go ahead and start a new project. Under iOS, let's choose app. I'm going to name mine L3 Demo 2, actually, because I've built this once before. Team, you can leave as none. Organization identifier should be the same as before. And then make sure it says Swift UI and Swift. Core data and tests are unchecked. Then let's go ahead and click on next. And I'm going to save it on my desktop. You can leave create git repository unchecked as well. Okay, so here is our brand new project. Let's expand the window a little bit so we have some space. And the first thing we are going to do is just add the image asset for that card into our asset library. Now, again, just like last time, you can put whatever asset you want. I'm going to reuse the Niagara Falls image asset that I used.
Ben de yeniden buradaki kamera görüntüsünü kullanayım. Buradan Ctrl C yapıp Ctrl V yapabiliyor muyum? Çok güzel yapabiliyorum.
Back in the lesson 1 demo. So go ahead and do that. Okay, now, in order to build this card, I first need some idea of what I'm going to be building. Now, whether that's just in my imagination or maybe a rough sketch on a piece of paper, or perhaps it's a design by a designer. In this case, I had this in my head and I wanted to lay out the biggest elements first, and that would be the image and the 2 pieces of text. In addition to that, I also have in mind the basic layout container that I'm going to use first. In this case, that would be the vertical stack, which arranges the views on top of each other. So let's go into our content view first, which is sort of the default view that gets created for you. And I am going to remove the V stack along with its padding.
Şimdi şu L1'i kapatabilirim mi ya da sanırım şöyle yapsam daha iyi olabilir mi? Bakayım bir tekrardan buraya. Burada kod biraz fazla karışık gibi, yani farklı bir kod var. O yüzden burayı yine komple sileceğim. Bu L1'deki kodu alıp buraya yapıştıracağım önce. Sonra L1'i kapatacağım ki kafamız karışmasın gidip gelirken. Tamamdır. Burada da sanıyorum ki şu kısmı siliyorum öncelikle. Buradan devam edeceğiz.
Padding modifier. So we should be left with body, opening bracket, ending bracket, and then this content view here, opening bracket, ending bracket. What we're going to type in, so at this point, actually, the way we've been doing it is by using the library. If you feel confident, you can just type out the code. If you don't feel that confident yet, you can go ahead, click this plus icon, open up the library, make sure you're on this views tab, and just type in image, and drag and drop it. That's perfectly fine. This is a perfectly safe way to build up to the point where you're comfortable just writing the code, and then sooner or later you won't even be using this library. For the image name, we are going to follow what we have in the asset library, whatever your asset is named right there. So remember to use the quotation marks, and we should see an image. Perfect. Now, obviously it's too big. I want it to fit on the screen. So we are going to add the resizable modifier. So what you do is press dot and the autocomplete menu will pop up, and I'm just going to choose resizable. Again, you can do that from the library, but make sure you go to the second tab, right, which is the list of modifiers. So you're going to search for resizable. You're going to just drag it and drop it there. Another one we're going to add is aspect ratio, because this looks kind of squished, right? And this is all review right now from lesson 1. We've done this together before. It's going to be exactly the same way. So there's aspect ratio. I'm going to hit dot to open up autocomplete again and choose, I'm going to type in fit, or just choose it from the menu. Again, if you don't see it from the menu, you can just type dot fit and you'll still get the same result as what I'm seeing here. I hit enter. I'm going to do dot again this time. I'm going to add corner radius. And this is going to round the corners nicely. I'm going to put 15 as the amount of rounding that I want. And remember, in the inspector view here, you can choose this tab to configure the modifiers and the view itself. So you can see here, this is the image. This Niagara Falls. I can change the aspect ratio, change the color. I can add some padding. Here's the corner radius. I can increase or decrease it because my cursor is right now is on image. If it's on body, I won't see that there. Okay, so that does it for the image. Now, I said that we would use the vertical stack to arrange it, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Again, I'm just going to type it out, but feel free to use the
padding'i eklemedi henüz. Bunu şimdi Ctrl X ile sileceğim. VStack ekleyeceğim. Şu şekilde buraya image koyacağım.
Image library and the vertical stack, whatever is inside of this pair of brackets right here, those are the views that get arranged on top of each other. So we're going to have to move this image. I'm going to press Command X to cut it and put my cursor inside the brackets, press Command V to paste it in there, and then I'm going to add the text elements. So let's go ahead and type in text, quotation marks, Niagara Falls. Next, let's add the description. So I'm going to put another text element here, and then you can type whatever you want. All right, that's speaking pretty highly of the falls. Now, what we're going to do is I want everything to be left aligned and also to add some spacing between these elements. So if I put my cursor on the VStack, we can
tekrar altına bir text yazalım. Is the good condition very cheap yazalım.
we can come over here and into the inspector panel, and we can actually configure those things. So let's see how that changes the code so that next time we can just type in the code straight away without having to use the user interface. So we're going to click this alignment, and that adds this alignment parameter here and changes it to leading. Let's change the spacing. I'm going to put 20 in there. And you see that adds another parameter, spacing equals 20. And then in the preview, you can see those things have taken effect here. Now let's make the title a little bigger here, Niagara Falls. So I'm going to put my cursor on the text, and we're going to change the font.
Bir Ctrl Z yapalım. Çünkü ben sola tıkladığımda herhangi bir şey değişmedi. Neden olabilir?
Deleting. Let's change the spacing. I'm going to put 20 in there.
Vertical stack. Ha, tamam. Biz vertical stack'teki elemanları align left yapıyoruz. Tamam, ben direkt text özelliğine align left yapacağımı düşünmüştüm. Bu şekilde değilmiş, tamamdır.
And you see that adds another parameter, spacing equals 20. And then in the preview, you can see those things have taken.
Buraya da leading adlı bir şey geliyor. Aynı zamanda biz buraya spacing de ekleyebiliyoruz. Spacing diye dersem neden olmadı? Ha, direkt bu şeymiş. Noktayla yazılmıyor. Nokta 0 burada yazılan gibi yazalım.
Have taken effect here. Now let's make the title a little bigger here, Niagara Falls. So I'm going to put my cursor on the text, and we're going to change the font to perhaps a title font, and let's make it bold. Let's change the weight to bold. Next, I want to create the ratings to the right of the Niagara Falls title. Now, when I see things side by side, I think horizontal stack. This is the same as a vertical stack, but instead of arranging things on top of each other, the horizontal stack arranges things side by side. So let's go check it out. So back inside Xcode here, since this is the first time we're using it, let's go ahead and bring it out from the library so we can see the code. Let's go into the views tab right here and type horizontal stack. That's the one right here. And let's drag it.
Bakalım library'den horizontal stack. Bunu buraya koyacağım sanırım. Değil mi?
Let's drag it right before the Niagara Falls text. As you can see, it looks exactly like the V stack, except it's an H stack. So we're going to move this Niagara Falls title into the brackets in between there. Command X to cut it, Command V to paste it. Now, visually, nothing changes because I don't have anything aside from that text inside the H stack. But one thing I want you to notice right now is that we have an H stack inside of a V stack. So this is how you can begin to build a layout from a combination of layout containers to arrange the views as you want them. You can nest these layout containers. Now let's go ahead and add an image beside the...
Aslında bir V stack'in içine yani vertical stack'in içine bir horizontal stack koyabiliriz. Aynı zamanda horizontal stack'in içine bir vertical stack de koyabiliriz. Bu şekilde farklı layoutlar elde edebiliriz. Yani burada tek bir görsel yerine ben 3 tane yan yana görsel koyup 3 tane yan yana title da koyabilirim. Ya da işte burada title'ları görselin altına değil de görselin yanına koyup görselleri alt alta koyabilirim vesaire. Burada değişik UI'lar yapılabilir. Buradan da ses butonları vesaire de kullanabiliyoruz buradan. Güzel. Şu content'i silelim. Devam edelim.
The Niagara Falls. We use the image element just like how we displayed the waterfalls, and we can search and find an image of 4 stars or 4.5 stars, whatever we want to display. Then we can add that to our asset library just like we've done here, and then we can put the image name here to display it. But I want to show you a different and arguably better way to do this using something called SF symbols. Let's remove this image view for now, and let me bring up this browser window. Now, SF symbols, they are a set of 4,400 symbols or icons on the iOS system that you can use for free because they're already installed on iOS. All you have to do is you know the appropriate name for these icons, and you can display them. You don't need to search for any images or anything. The best thing is that they behave like text so that you can change the foreground color of them, you can change the size of them and things like that very, very easily. Let's go back into Xcode and see how we can use an SF symbol to display the stars. So
Bu SF symbol 4 gözüküyor burada. Ben baktığımda şimdi 5 gözüküyor. Burada farklı şeyler de gelmiş sanırım. Animasyonlar ve aslında buradaki her bir ne denir? Her bir içerik farklı bir şekilde anime edilebiliyor. Bugün de bununla ilgili bir içerik görmüştüm aslında. Yani bu animasyonun şeyini de değiştirebiliyorsunuz. Şuradan gözüktüğü gibi. Kümülatif seçiyorsunuz, iteratif seçiyorsunuz. İteratif seçerseniz animasyondaki bir önceki şey yani her animasyon başına bir şey aktif oluyor. Kümülatif seçerseniz üçü de yavaş yavaş aktif oluyor vesaire gibi farklı özellikler eklenmiş. Bunun her emoji için, her sembol için ayrı ayrı yapılmış olması bayağı uğraş gerektiren bir şey aslında. Şimdi bunları kullanacağız anladığım kadarıyla. Devam edelim tekrardan. Bunu kapatalım.
So just like displaying an image, we use the image view, but instead of specifying the asset library name like we have up here, we're going to specify the system name of the SF symbol. So we type in system name, that should come up, and notice that it's lowercase s, uppercase n with a colon, and then we're going to put the name of the SF symbol, and this has got to be in quotations as well. So I'm going to put star, and you can see it instantly shows up. I did not have...
Pekala, image diyorum. Parantezimi açıp kapattım. System name diyorum. Buraya star yazıyorum. Doğru mudur? Doğru.
Not have to add this star image into our asset library or anything like that. Another really cool thing is that often these symbols come with an outline version as well as a filled version. And typically the filled version, you just have to add .fill to the end of the name, and that's what you get. Now you might be wondering, how would I know this system name? Well, that's where this comes in handy. So SF Symbols is a free download for an app that looks like this, and it allows you to either browse through the symbols or search for it. So if I search for star, I can see these are all .fill to the end of the name, and that's what you get. Now you might be wondering, how would I know this system name? Well, that's where this comes in handy. So SF Symbols is a free download for an app that looks like this, and it allows you to either browse through the symbols or search for it. So if I search for star, I can see these are all of the system names that I can use. Like there's star, star.fill, which is what we just used, and there's even this one, it's half star. Now, if you don't want to download this official app by Apple, I think in the past there were other websites which listed out all the SF symbols. You can search SF symbol browser or something like that in Google. But seeing as how this is the official Apple app, and I'm sure this will get updated first before those third-party websites do, I would recommend that you use this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give Niagara Falls 4.5 stars. So I'm going to put 4 of these and 1 of these. So I'm going to actually copy this name, and that's going to copy this part down here. Let's go back to Xcode, and I am going to image system name and paste. Oops, I need quotations, right? And now I have 1.5. So all I'm going to do is copy this, paste it a couple of times so that we have there 4.5 stars.
Pekala. 4,5 yıldız için 4 tane tam yıldız, bir tane yarım yıldız yapacağız. O yarım yıldızın tam adını göremedim. Star.leading half dot filled. Star dot leading half dot filled. Tamam. Güzel abi. Biz de ulaştık o sonuca.
Now this doesn't look quite right as well, right? I want to push the stars all the way to the right, and they're also a little big and they're not the color that I want. So how do we address this? Well, first of all, let me explain how these elements are arranged inside an H stack. So let's go into selection mode for now so that I can select these elements and show you this outline. You'll notice that inside this H stack only goes up to here. What's happening is that this H stack is only as wide as it needs to be to fit all of the elements inside of it. Furthermore, these elements inside of it, you can see the outline is right up against the text element. Same thing with the images, right? That blue outline, that's the surrounding frame. That's how much space it takes up. It is only as big as that view needs to be. Now, this is typical of views. They only have a frame as big as it needs to be, but there are some views that actually take up as much space as it can. So that is actually what we want to put. One of these elements is called a spacer. Now this spacer view will basically take up as much space as it can. So let me demonstrate this. Again, since it's the first time we've used this, let's open up the library under views. Let's search for spacer. There we go. A flexible space that expands along the major axis if it's containing stack layout, or both axes if it's not contained in a stack. Essentially, it's just saying that it's going to take up as much space as possible. Look at what happens here. By putting a spacer in between the text and the stars right here, first of all, it pushes the H stack right as wide as it can be. Because remember, the H stack expands to as much space as the elements inside of it requires. The text still requires just that bare minimum. The stars, again, requires the bare minimum, but the spacer, on the other hand, is taking up all this empty space right here. You don't see the outline, but it's right there in the middle. So the spacer is a great way to space elements apart, as its name suggests. Now, one handy tip before we move on, if you have multiple spacers in the same container, it divides up all of the available space by the number of spacers you have. So if I put a spacer before the text and after the images here, you can see that this space and this space and this space are all equal. So the spacers take up all the available space spacers you have. So if I put a spacer before the text and after the images here, you can see that this space and this space and this space are all equal. So the spacers take up all the available space and divvies them up between each other evenly. Right? But I'm gonna.
Anladım. Yani aslında soldan sağdan da padding ekleyip bu iki elemanı ya da kaç eleman varsa burada hepsinin arasına spacer ekleyip daha böyle ortalara doğru kayan bir görüntü, bir layout elde edebiliyoruz. Bunu otomatik kendisi ayarlıyor anladığım kadarıyla.
Remove those two. Just going to leave the spacer element in the middle. It's going to take everything up here. We're going to add some padding to the left and right later anyways. Okay, so let's finish up this ratings by adding some text right below the stars. In our initial design, we had, in brackets, a couple of reviews, or the number of reviews there. So how would we do that? So I could put a piece of text right here that said text. Just put some brackets, reviews, like that. But you can see here, it does that, not the effect that we wanted. Why not nest another layout container? So what we're going to do here, so this is an H stack, right? I'm going to put these 5 stars in a V stack so that we can put the text right under it. So let's create a V stack right here. And we are going to put...
Yani aslında biz bir reviews sekmesi ekleyeceğiz buraya. Reviews yazısı ekleyeceğiz. Ancak bu reviews yazısının bu yıldızların altında olmasını istiyoruz. Çünkü aslında bu yıldızlar reviews'ı represent ediyor. Bu reviews'ı temsil ediyor. Ondan dolayı biz bu yıldızların altına nasıl bu yazıyı ekleyebiliriz? Buradaki image'leri aslında bir VStack içine koymamız gerekiyor. Şu şekilde. Bir saniye. Bir şeyi yanlış düşündüm. Bakalım nasıl çözecek bunu.
Put the images in there. As you can see, it lays it out on top of each other as expected. And I'm going to put the review text down there as well. Now, this is sort of what I want, but I need to lay these out horizontally.
Horizontal siteye çevireceğiz, evet. Şimdi tekstimizi yazalım. Reviews diyelim. Reviews. Şu kısmı tekrardan bir stack içerisine alacağız. Şu şekilde. Aynen.
Right? So I'm going to nest an H stack in there. And so that actually gives me what I want. Now the stars and the reviews text is a little large for my liking. So, and plus it's not the right color too. So I am going to add some modifiers to it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to type this out, and I encourage you to do so as well. If you don't remember, following along and typing it out is a great way to remember. So to change the color, we use foreground color, and I'm going to hit dot so we can bring up autocomplete. I'm going to choose orange. Press enter. There it is. It's orange. I am going to go to the end and hit dot again, and this time I'm going to change the font, and hit dot again, and I'm going to choose caption to make it smaller. So that's about the size that I would want it. Now I would have to apply. Let me just make some more space so it's easier to see. Yeah, perfect. Now I could apply these two things to each star like that, right? And that would essentially get me what I want. But there is a better way to do this, and that is to put these two modifiers instead on the H stack right here. Okay, watch what happens. I'm going to take off these modifiers.
Bu gayet iyi bir özellik. Yani aslında şu iki özelliğe örnek veriyorum. Buradaki bütün image'lar ya da herhangi bir obje olabilir bu. için uygulamak istiyorsunuz ve bunun için her seferinde bütün objelerin altına giderek bu iki özelliği yazmak yerine bu buradaki doğru mu gözüküyor burası? Şöyle
You can see that each of them have the orange color and the caption size. The reason for this is because modifiers
bu iki özelliği tamamen HStack'in bir özelliği haline getirebiliyoruz. Ortak özelliklerin hepsini aslında bu şekilde yapmak çok daha clean code denen şeye yakın bir yazım olur muhtemelen.
on a container view get applied to all the views inside of it. That's awesome, right? So I actually want the same thing to happen to this. So instead of applying it on the H stack, why don't we put it on the V stack so that it includes this text element? So Command X, Command V. Now you can see the orange color in the caption gets applied to the whole thing. And now for the final piece of content on the card itself, and those are the icons on the lower right corner. So for this, it is pretty simple because we have this description text already in a VStack. So under here, we're going to add the icons. We're going to use SF symbols. We're going to use system name, and let's bring up our trusty app here. This is going to be, let's use binoculars, and we're going to choose the filled one. Let's copy name and paste it in there. Whoops, we need quotations like that. Those binoculars right there. Let's add another one.
En alta, şuranın da altına image eklenmiş. Neydi? Buraya system name yazıyorum. Binoculars field diyorum. Fil, sadece fil miydi? Fil. Tamam. Bir şey daha ekleyecek sanırım. Aynen.
This one is going to be, I'm going to use a fork and knife. Copy that. And we're going to put that. We're going to put the fork and knife first. Now I'm going to put these two into an H stack, like that. And I am going to space them so that it is on the right hand side. So all I'm going to do is add a spacer element before the two images, which pushes it all the way to the right. And finally, we are going to change the color and the size. We're going to add a foreground of gray and a font of caption. Foreground color, gray, font, caption. Now you can see how typing it together with autocomplete is way faster than opening up the library each time to choose the modifiers.
H'teki mesela şu şekilde yapabilir miydik? Yok, yapamıyoruz. Yani mesela neyi düşündüm az önce? VStack. Biz VStack'teki bütün elemanları aslında align left dediğimiz için bunlar da align left geldi. Ve eğer ben sadece bu elemanların en sağa gitmesini istiyorsam buraya spacer ekleyerek bu spacer'ın alabileceği maksimum alanı almasını sağlayarak bu iki elemanı en sağa align edebiliyorum aslında. Hani bu VStack özelliğinde alignment leading olsa da ben bunu spacer ekleyerek değiştirebiliyorum.
And again, if you're still more comfortable,
Foreground color'ı gray yaptı. Gray ve de fontu caption yaptı.
with doing it this way, that's completely fine. I love this new version of Xcode and SwiftUI where you can have multiple ways of doing things. You can configure things through the inspector because it makes it the learning experience much better and easier. As you progress, you'll probably be not even touching the library or the inspector panel. You'll just be typing and you'll be moving really, really fast. So don't worry if you're not there yet, you will get there if you continue to progress along this journey. Okay, so next up we have the background for this card. Now let's go ahead. This is the vertical stack, right? You can see when I select this blue outline highlights the boundaries or the frame of this V-stack. So like the H-stack, the V-stack only takes up as much space as it needs to. So you can see that it's right up against the edge right there. So if we go down, this is the ending bracket for the V-stack right here. If you're not sure, what you can do is collapse.
Bir saniye. Sanırım şu moddayken interaktif bir modda oluyor şu anda. Atıyorum şunlar bir buton olsaydı bu butonlara tıklayabilecektim. Ancak layout'u daha anlaşılır bir şekilde görmek için şuradaki moda geçiş yapmak gerekiyor. İsmi ne oluyor bunun bilmiyorum. Ancak burada layout'u daha temiz bir şekilde sınırlarını vesaire görebiliyoruz.
Takes up as much space as it needs to. So you can see that it's right up against the edge right there. So if we go down, this is the ending bracket for the VStack right here. If you're not sure, what you can do is collapse the code in between the opening bracket and the closing bracket, just so it's easier to read. So how you can do that is you press your, click your cursor here inside the VStack, and you can go into right here, code folding, and you can fold and unfold. Just take note of those shortcut keys inside Xcode, so you don't need to come into this menu all the time. But I'm going to choose fold and watch what happens. See, it folds all of that stuff into these two brackets so that it's easier to.
Bunu aynı zamanda bir saniye ne oldu? Bunu aynı zamanda nereden yapabiliyormuşuz? Şurada editor mı dedi? Code folding'den fold. Aynı zamanda işte command option ve yön tuşlarıyla da yapılabiliyor. Sağ ve sola şeklinde.
Easier to work with, and then it's a visual thing. That's all it is. And if you want to open it back up, you can double click it to open it back up. And again, once you get familiar with Xcode, you don't even need to bring out that menu. You can use your keyboard and just do that, and you can move really fast. So the reason I wanted to do that is because I want to add a modifier to the VStack, and in particular, the one I want to add is, let's go under modifiers and choose background. This one here, layers the given view behind this view. So essentially, it allows me to specify a view as a background to the VStack. So let's see how we can use this to our advantage. So this is the background for the VStack, and I wonder why it changes it to blue. I haven't even specified any view, but that was what I was going to do. So I was going to put a rectangle to be specific. So rectangle is a view. You can find it actually inside the view library here. It's a simple shape that you can specify like foreground color, corner radius, and things like that. So I'm going to drag and put that in between the brackets.
Mesela view yazınca neden bende hata veriyor?
I was going to, it changes it to blue. I haven't.
Burada onun yerine blue'ya çeviriyor. Ben acaba yazdığım için mi? Bunu tekrardan deneyeceğim. Background gerek. Aynen, yani yazınca nedense hata veriyor ama sürükleyince vermiyor. İlginç.
I haven't even specified any view, but that was what I was going to do. So I was going to put a rectangle to be specific. So rectangle is a view. You can find it actually inside the view library here. It's a simple shape that you can specify like foreground color, corner radius, and things like that. So I'm going to drag and put that in between the brackets of the modifier. By default, I guess it's black. So this is where things start to get interesting. I'm going to add modifiers to the rectangle to change its look and feel, and that essentially is the background for the VStack. So let's go ahead and add a foreground color to my rectangle. So I can say, dot blue, for example, and that would be blue. You can say green, and that would be green, right? So let's leave it as green for now. We're going to change it later because if I change it to white right now, we won't be able to see it. Now, the thing is, we probably want some spacing, right? You can see this is right up against the edge. So what we're going to do is add some padding. We're just going to use the padding modifier like we've done before. And great, we have some padding between the edges of the screen and the card. But what about padding inside of the card, right? You can see the green background. We'd want some padding there. So what I'm going to do is add another padding modifier right here before the background modifier. And you can see that that's this padding right here, whereas this padding is this. Now, I know that might be a little bit confusing, but the way to think about this is that you have your VStack. This is your original view. And then these modifiers get applied in sequence. That means in.
Yani ben şimdi bir padding eklediğimde bu padding öncesinde gelen her şeyi paddingliyor. Öncesinde gelen her şeye padding bırakıyor. Yani VStack ile background burada beraber bir padding alıyor. Ancak VStack'ten sonra gelip padding eklersem bu padding'den bu background etkilenmiyor. Yani yukarıdan aşağıya bir padding sıralaması var diye anladım.
In order. So if you look at the code that we have right now, first we have padding. So that adds, actually, let me just remove this code for now. I'm going to press Command X so that you can see what we have. So without this padding modifier, you can see that the blue frame, right, is right there. If I add the padding element, essentially adds padding to all four sides. And now I put the background modifier on there. Let me just remove that last padding bit. Right, the background gets applied to the padding as well. And then when I put another padding modifier, it gets applied to the outside of the background. Like that. What happens if, let's say I move this padding modifier here? right? Then we get padding and then another set of padding, so that's why it's so thick. And then the background gets applied. If I take these two padding elements and I put it after the background, then we get something like this where there's no padding, right? The background gets applied to the V-stack, and then you have a set of outer padding and another set of outer padding. So the order matters, sequence matters here. Okay, so now that you understand that, let's change this foreground color to white, and we're gonna add another modifier to the rectangle. And let's create some space here.
Evet, tamam.
Dot shadow. Now I'm just going to specify 15 for the radius, and you can see that you have a nice shadow effect. That's how easy it is to apply that. Now the last thing to do is to apply a corner radius to our card. Now I don't want to apply it after the shadow. I actually want to apply it before the shadow because I want the shadow to apply to the rounded card and not round the corners of the shadow, because remember, order matters, right? So if I do corner radius 15, you can see that, let's choose this. You can see that I have the rounded corners and then the shadow gets applied. But let's say we do it the other way around, right? And I put a corner radius on the shadow. You can see it completely breaks.
Bir saniye. Şu şekilde daha güzel gözükecek, evet. Ben birazcık geri alıyorum.
Order matters, right? So if I do corner radius 15, you can see that, let's choose this. You can see that I have the rounded corners and then the shadow gets applied. So let's say we do it the other way around, right? And I put a corner radius on the shadow. You can see it completely breaks things. So I want to round the card first and then apply the shadow to the rounded card.
Anladım. Aslında Xcode'da yazdığımız her şeyde yazdığımız özelliklerin sırayla uygulanıyor. Yani yukarıdan aşağıya gelirken az önce de söylediğim gibi 30 yaparsak tekrar çok bir şey değişmiyor gibi ama sanki 30 yapsak bir tık daha uyumlu duracaklar gibi geldi.
Card. Essentially, this is the rectangle. We're using it as a background for that V-stack. Okay, so finally, the last step is to put that mint green background on everything. And just like in lesson 1, we've done this before. So we are going to use a depth stack, right? And we're going to put a base color at the bottom, and then this whole V-stack card, this whole thing on top of that color. So let's do that. If you remember, what is a depth stack? It is a Z stack, like that. I'm going to put a color. I'm going to choose mint, system mint, okay? And again, this is the safe area, right? So we have to apply another modifier to it. So it ignores safe area. So it goes all the way. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put the V-stack on top of it. So this whole thing right here, and keep in mind this is still collapsed, which also makes it easy to select. Command X, Command V to paste it inside the Z stack. So there you have it. So how is that? As you build more user interfaces inside Xcode, you're just going to get faster. Also makes it easy to select.
Burada color'a yine ignore safe area özelliği uyguluyoruz. Şunu da şöyle yapalım. Ardından da bu bir saniye. Şu kısmı, çünkü VST'yi biz foldlamıştık. Buraya yerleştiriyoruz. Ve bu şekilde bir görüntü elde ediyoruz.
Select Command X, Command V to paste it inside the Z stack. So there you have it. So how was that? As you build.
Gayet güzel oldu. Bir kart aslında geliştirmiş olduk. Bu ne için kullanılabilir? Örneğin bir uygulama yapıyorsunuzdur. İkinci el satış. Gerçi ikinci el satış için olmayabilir de. Bir online satış uygulaması yapıyorsunuz. Trendyol gibi, hepsi burada gibi. Ancak biraz daha UI'yi değişik bir şey yapmak istiyorsunuz. Burada işte kartların olduğu, kart sistemine göre çalışan, işte sağa sola kaydırdıkça ürünlerin değiştiği, yeni önerilerin geldiği vesaire ya da yukarı aşağı şekilde bir sistem geliştirilebilir. Şu an ilk aklıma gelen şeylerden birisi bu.
You build more user interfaces inside Xcode, you're just going to get faster and better. Remember that you can get the associated Xcode project with this lesson, as well as any challenges and quizzes, by creating a free Code with Chris account and taking this course on our learning platform. We also have a free community where you can get help if you are stuck on something. Just visit codecrew.codewithchris.com. In the next lesson, we are going to build an app that is not just a user interface, but also includes app logic and user interaction. So it's going to be a good one. I'll see you there. Today you're starting a...
Şu an için aslında lesson 2 ve 3'ü bitirmiş olduk. Yani day ikinci günün, gün 2'nin görevlerini tamamladık. Bugün için bu kadar olacak. Sonlandırmadan önce de bu uygulamayı bir çalıştırmak istiyorum. Yine bir build edip görmek istiyorum yani. Şu şekilde. Birkaç saniye alacak bu sanırım. Aynen geldi. Hmm. Uygulamanın adı L1 demo olarak geldi. Ha yok, L2 demo olarak geldi. Tamam. Bu yeni yüklendi yani. Az önce L1 demo vardı sadece. Eski yüklediğim uygulamalarda gözüküyor mu acaba? Öyle mi anlamam gerekiyor? Yüklenmesi biraz zaman alıyor tabii ki. Aynı zamanda kayıt almak da açık olduğu için. Bir sonraki derste neler yapılıyor? Starting the Workout Game. Bir oyun yapıyoruz sanırım. Swift Functions demiş bir lesson 6'ya. UI Buttons and Properties. Adding the App Logic. Yani aslında bir kart oyunu inşa ediyor gibi anladım ben. Aslında bu da kart oyununun ilk teması olabilir. Kart oyununa giriş olarak. Yaklaşık 2 saatlik bir kısım daha kaldı. Bunları da 2 gün içerisinde yani 3. gün ve 4. gün olarak ayırıp bitirmiş olurum diye düşünüyorum 8 günlük bu kursu. Ardından buna geçmek istiyorum daha çok bundan ziyade. Hem Türkçe bir içerik hem benim için hem izleyenler için anlaması daha kolay olabilir. Aynı zamanda sertifika veriyor. Ve BTK Akademi hani biraz daha böyle bilinen sektörde e, daha nasıl denebilir e, iş görebilecek bir kurs gibi geldi bana. Uygulama da bu şekilde, herhangi bir buton vesaire yok. Yalnızca görsellerden oluşuyor.